$15,000. That was the total printed on the crumpled receipt I just pulled out of my brother Timothy's jacket pocket. It wasn't for a client dinner. It was for a VIP table at a Vegas nightclub called Sin City, billed directly to the company card. Just 6 hours ago, my father looked me dead in the eye and told me we didn't have the budget for a $200 software upgrade I needed to do my job. $200 was a financial crisis. $15,000 for bottle service was a business expense. The contrast wasn't just unfair, it was violent. Before I tell you exactly what I did with that receipt, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't wait for a convenient time. I didn't schedule a meeting. The next morning, I walked straight past my father's assistant and laid the receipt on his desk. Right next to it, I placed a second document I'd pulled from the server logs at 4 a.m, a payroll comparison sheet. The numbers were stark, black and white proof of my own stupidity. Timothy and Brandon were taking home a base salary of $130,000 each, plus quarterly bonuses. I was making $55,000. No bonuses, no benefits, just the title of contractor and the workload of 3 people. Gary didn't even flinch. He looked at the receipt for the Vegas club, then at the payroll sheet, and finally at me. He took a sip of his coffee, as calm as if we were discussing the weather. I expected him to be embarrassed. I expected him to panic. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and sighed, the way a parent sighs at a toddler who just doesn't understand how the world works. "Haley," he said, his voice dropping into that patronizing register I knew so well. "You're confusing effort with value. Timothy and Brandon are building relationships. They are out there securing the legacy. That costs money. They're stealing from you, Dad," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steel hard. "They build a bachelor party as a client dinner. Meanwhile, I'm running the entire operations division for less than half of what they make. I handle the logistics, the vendors, the crises. I am the reason this company functions." He laughed. A short, dry sound. "You handle the details, Haley. You're very good at details. But let's be honest. You're the help. They are the face. The clients want to see men in charge. It makes them feel secure. You're just filling time until you find a husband to pay your bills. You're a liability I keep around because I'm a generous father." The air left the room. For 7 years, I had told myself that if I just worked hard enough, if I just saved the day one more time, he would finally see me. I thought I was paying my dues. Now, looking at his dismissive sneer, I realized I hadn't been paying dues. I had been paying a ransom for love that didn't exist. This is the trap of normalized cruelty. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens by degrees. First, they ask you to work a weekend as a favor. Then, the favor becomes an expectation. Then, the expectation becomes a duty. They gaslight you into believing that your sacrifice is a virtue, that your silence is loyalty. They starve you of praise so that when they give you a single crumb, you treat it like a feast. I looked at my father and realized I wasn't his daughter. I was his appliance. Useful when working, invisible when not, and easily replaced when broken. He didn't love me. He loved the convenience of me. And for the first time in my life, the need to please him evaporated, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. I didn't scream. I didn't flip a desk. I didn't give Gary the satisfaction of seeing a tear. I walked out of his office, down the corridor lined with portraits of my brothers, shaking hands with mayors and celebrities, and went straight to the only place that actually mattered 48 hours before the $500,000 sterling gala. The loading dock. The cavernous back room was a hive of controlled chaos. Crates of imported orchids were being unloaded next to rigs of theatrical lighting. This was the pulse of the company. My brothers thought events happened by magic. I knew they happened because of the people sweating in this concrete bay. Tony, the lead lighting director, saw me coming. He looked exhausted. "Haley, thank God. We need approval on the rigging for the aerialists. Brandon isn't answering his phone. Brandon is currently 3 martinis deep at a client lunch," I said, my voice level. "And I can't approve the rigging, Tony. I don't work here anymore." Tony froze. A crate of cables clattered to the floor. "What do you mean you don't work here? The gala is in 2 days. Who is calling the cues?" "Gary thinks Timothy can handle it," I said. Tony laughed, a sharp, nervous bark. "Timothy? Timothy thinks a gobo is a type of clown. If you walk, this show goes dark. It's going dark anyway, Tony." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the florists and caterers nearby could hear. "When was the last time a check from Mitchell Events cleared on the first try?" The silence that fell over the loading dock was heavier than the equipment. Tony's eyes darted to the floor. He said it was a bank error. Said he'd fix it after the gala deposit hit. "The gala deposit hit 2 weeks ago," I said, dropping the bomb with surgical precision. Timothy spent $15,000 of it in Vegas last weekend. Gary spent the rest covering the overdrafts. They are 60 days past due on your invoices, Tony. If you hang those lights today, you are donating your labor to a sinking ship. You won't see a dime. I watched the realization ripple through the room. It wasn't just Tony. It was Maria with the flowers. It was the catering team setting up the prep tables. For years, I had been the shield, covering for my family's incompetence, begging vendors to wait, promising them I'd fix it. I had used my own reputation to buy my father credit he didn't deserve. I'm leaving, I said to the room. I am walking out that door, and I am taking my integrity with me. I suggest you do the same before you lose any more inventory. Tony looked at the half-assembled truss. He looked at me. Then he spit on the concrete, pulled his radio off his belt, and shouted, "Strike it! We're loading out!" The sound of reverse beepers filled the air. It was a symphony of collapse. I walked out the side door, into the bright Chicago afternoon. Behind me, the venue wasn't buzzing with anticipation anymore. It was going quiet. I didn't look back at the empty ballroom. I knew exactly what Gary would find when he finally strolled in to take credit for my work. Silence, darkness, and the echoing reality of his own arrogance. The next morning, my phone was vibrating so hard it was slowly walking itself across the kitchen counter. 17 missed calls from Gary. 12 from Timothy. 3 voicemails that started with screaming and ended with begging. I didn't listen to them. I didn't answer. I simply turned the volume down and opened my laptop. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony for Apex events. There was just me, a pot of black coffee, and a contact list I had memorized over 7 years of being the invisible engine of my father's company. I didn't waste time designing a logo or printing business cards. I went straight for the throat. I dialed the private number for Elena Sterling, the chairwoman of the gala. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with stress. "Whoever this is, I don't have time. Mitchell Events isn't answering their phones, and I have 500 guests arriving in 36 hours. They aren't answering because they don't have answers." "Elena," I said, keeping my voice calm, factual, lethal. "This is Haley." "Haley? Thank God. Where is everyone? Why is the venue dark?" "Gary Mitchell hasn't paid his vendors in 2 months, I said. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't use soft language like cash flow issues. I gave her the raw data. The lighting team, the florists, the caterers, they all walked off the job yesterday. The venue is empty, Elena. And it's going to stay empty because nobody works for free." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "My gala, he promised me. He promised you a show. He didn't tell you he couldn't afford the ticket," I interrupted. "But here is the good news. The vendors didn't disappear. They are standing by, waiting for my call. I have a hold on the grand ballroom at the Palmer House. It's fully staffed and available due to a cancellation. I can move your entire event. Keep your original design, and have the doors open by 6 tomorrow evening. You can do that? I've already done the logistics. The trucks are loaded. The crew is ready. The only thing missing is your signature." I paused, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. "You have 2 choices, Elena. You can stick with a contract held by a man who is currently screaming at his receptionist because he can't find the light switch, or you can hire me, and I will save your night." "Do it," she said. "Send me the contract." The next 30 hours were a blur of precision. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I conducted an orchestra of moving parts from the passenger seat of my car and the floor of the new venue. When the doors opened at 6, the room wasn't just ready. It was perfect. The orchids were fresher. The lighting was sharper. And the staff paid up front from the deposit Elena wired directly to my new business account were smiling. I stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, watching the guests flood in. I saw the flash of cameras. I saw Elena Sterling laughing, champagne in hand, telling her board members about the miracle worker who saved the day. My phone buzzed again. A text from Gary. "You ungrateful thief. You'll pay for this." I looked at the text, then down at the gala below. I wasn't a thief. I was the architect of my own liberation. Gary thought he owned the clients because his name was on the door. He never understood that in this business, you don't own the client. You rent their trust. And his rent was past due. The euphoria of the gala lasted exactly 42 minutes. I was standing near the bar, accepting a glass of champagne from Elena Sterling, when the double doors at the main entrance swung open. It wasn't another guest. It was 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a cheap gray suit holding a thick manila envelope. The room went silent. In the events industry, police usually mean a noise complaint or a fire code violation. I started walking toward them, my heels clicking on the marble floor, confident I could handle it. I was the CEO now. I was the fixer. "Haley Mitchell?" the man in the gray suit asked, He didn't look at me. He looked at the paper in his hand. Yes. Is there a problem, officer? I asked, looking past him to the cops. You are being served with a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction, the man said, thrusting the envelope into my chest. You are hereby ordered to cease all business operations immediately. You are barred from contacting any clients listed in the attached exhibit, including Miss Sterling. This is insane, I said, my laugh sounding brittle in the quiet room. On what grounds? Embezzlement and theft of trade secrets, one of the officers said, stepping forward. We have a warrant to seize your electronic devices and freeze your business assets, pending a forensic audit. Embezzlement? I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't take a dime. My father owes me money. The complaint alleges you misappropriated $15,000 in company funds for personal entertainment in Las Vegas, the officer recited. Bored. And that you stole proprietary client lists to launch a competing enterprise. The room spun. Gary hadn't just sued me. He had weaponized my own discovery against me. He was pinning Timothy's Vegas bender on me. Since I was the contractor who managed the books, he was claiming I had authorized the charge for myself. It was a lie so bold, so monstrous, that for a second, I couldn't breathe. He knew I didn't do it. He knew Timothy did it. But he also knew I was the one who signed the expense reports. I looked at Elena. Her expression had shifted from gratitude to wariness. Nobody wants to do business with a criminal. I need your phone, ma'am, the officer said. I handed it over, my hand shaking. But before the screen went dark, a text notification popped up. It was from Gary. Come back and work for free to pay off your debt. Or watch it all burn. I told you you're a liability. They escorted me out of my own victory party. They didn't handcuff me. But they might as well have. I stood on the sidewalk in my evening gown, watching the police cruiser drive away with my laptop and my phone. I tried to use my Apple Watch to call a ride, but the payment failed. Card declined. He had frozen everything. My business account, my personal savings, even my credit cards. I sat on the curb, shivering in the cool night air. The high of the last 2 days evaporated, replaced by a cold, crushing nausea. I had underestimated him. I thought I was fighting a businessman. I was actually fighting a narcissist who would rather burn his own house down than let me leave it. I had the talent, the clients, and the truth. But at that moment, sitting penniless on a Chicago street corner, I realized none of that matters when your opponent owns the narrative and the bank. The lawyer's name was David, and he cost $500 an hour, money I had to borrow from my roommate because my accounts were frozen. I sat across from him, my hands gripping the edge of his mahogany desk, waiting for him to tell me I was going to prison. He had been reading my employment file for 20 minutes in silence. Every page turn sounded like a gavel. Gary Mitchell is accusing you of stealing proprietary client lists and intellectual property, David said, finally looking up. He claims the Sterling Gala design, the vendor contacts, and the operational run of show belong to Mitchell Events. I designed them, I said, my voice thin. But I did it while working for him. Doesn't that make them his property? Usually, yes. If you are an employee. David flipped to a specific document, my tax returns from the last 7 years. He tapped the paper with a gold pen. Haley, why are these 1,099 forms? Gary classified me as an independent contractor to dodge payroll taxes and benefits. I paid my own self-employment tax every year. When I told David, he laughed not at me, but at Gary's stupidity. As a 1,099 worker with no work-for-hire clause in my contract, every design, client list, and system I created legally belonged to me, not Mitchell Events. Gary had been licensing my work for 7 years, and he fired the licensor. David immediately prepared a countersuit for unpaid overtime and copyright infringement. The 1,099 status I always hated suddenly became my shield. In court, Gary painted me as a thief, betraying her father. David shut it down with a single stack of documents. Without a work-for-hire agreement, the judge ruled. I owned the intellectual property. The embezzlement charge evaporated when David proved Timothy used the company card in Las Vegas while I was in Chicago. We countersued for unpaid labor and damages. The judge advised Gary to settle. Mitchell Events collapsed in 3 months. No clients, no IP. Crushed by the judgment. I bought the building at auction. Now it houses my company, Apex. Tony returned as technical director with real benefits and a W-2. Not a 1,099. Gary disappeared. Timothy sells cars. Brandon lives at home, standing over the Chicago skyline. I realized I never needed their approval. Value is not bestowed, it is built. Walking away was survival. Some families feed on you until you leave. If you've had to save yourself the same way, this story is yours too.